Welcome to the Math Crew, where we learn new things and grow in mathematics. I'm Miss Nisha, your math teacher. Let's get started. Today we're going to practice subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Unlike denominators are denominators that are different from each other. For example, if I have 1/5 minus 1/3. 5, of course, is different than 3. So we have unlike denominators. In 4th grade, you practice subtracting with like denominators. For example, 6/8 minus 2/8. Okay, but in 5th grade, you're now going to start practicing with unlike. At the bottom of your mat, if you have it, if you do not, of course, you can use notebook paper and follow along. Pause the video when necessary. Subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. This is how you do it. You're going to first find the least common multiple of all denominators in the equation. That's called your LCM. Then you're going to create equivalent fractions with the common denominator. Lastly, you're going to subtract the fractions. So our first problem is 7/8 minus 2/16. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more math practice. The first thing we do is find the LCM. That is, again, called the least common multiples. Okay, so you're basically going to list the multiples of your denominators. 8 is my denominator in the first fraction, and 16 is my denominator in the second fraction. You're going to list those multiples and find the smallest one that they both have in common. So the first multiple of 8, 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2, 16. 8 times 3, 24. 8 times 4, 32. 8 times 5, 40. 8 times 6, 48. We can stop there. I normally tell students to do about 5 or 6 multiples. Actually, if you notice, we already have 16, but because we're practicing the skill, let's do the multiples of 16. So we have 16, and then if we have 16 times 2, that's going to be 32, I believe. Let's see. Yes, 32. All right. And you would just continue to multiply. You say 16 times 3, 16 times 4, etc. And so we already have a number that they both share, and that's the number 16. That number is our least common multiple. That's step 1. Pause the video and ask yourself, what is step 1? Step 1, again, is to find the least common multiple. Step 1. All right, now that we have the least common multiple, we're going to now create our equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are fractions that have the same value as another fraction, but it looks different. It has different numbers. So you may be asking, okay, which fraction are we going to make an equivalent for? Well, the purpose of the equivalent fraction is to have the same number of pieces as your LCM. Your LCM is 16, so we want 16 parts, which means we want 16 as our denominator. So which fraction does not have 16th as its denominator? Which fraction does not have 16 as its denominator? If you said 7/8, you're correct. So that is the fraction that needs an equivalent. we want to have 16ths as our denominator. So step 2, I'm going to take 7/8 and create an equivalent for 7/8 that's going to have 16 in the denominator. So this is how you set it up. You write 7/8, you put the multiplication sign, draw a rectangle, equal, and then the 16 in your denominator. You may be wondering, okay, what's the rectangle for? Here is where you're going to put a fraction that has a value of 1 whole. What I mean by that is a fraction that has the same number in the numerator and in the denominator. So you ask yourself, 8 times what gives me 16? If you said 2, you're correct. Whatever you do at the bottom, you have to do at the top. If you're going to multiply by 2 in the denominator, you're also going to multiply by 2 in the numerator. And 2 over 2 is a fraction that equals 1 whole. Do we agree? Great. So that is what I meant by you're going to multiply your fraction by a fraction that equals 1 whole. So you're going to have the same number in the numerator and in the denominator to make this equivalent fraction. So now that I have that, let's multiply. 7 times 2 is 14. Great. Now we've just completed step 2, which is to create our equivalent fraction that has 16ths as its denominator. So 7/8 is no longer what we are using. What are we now using? What fraction just replaced 7/8? Hopefully you said 14/16. Great. Now, do we have like units? Do we have the same number of parts in our first and our second fraction? If you said yes, great. That means that we can now solve the problem. 14 minus 2 is what? 12. When it comes to denominators, when we're adding or subtracting them, we simply place that number in the denominator. You do not do anything with your denominator. It's simply telling you how many parts you have in your entire figure. If I were to draw models, I would have 14 of 16 pieces shaded. I would have 2 of 16 pieces shaded. So I'm not going to change my total parts. I'm only going to subtract in my numerator. Do not touch the denominator. Okay, let's review. Step 1, when we have unlike denominators, we're going to find our what? LCM, our least common multiple. We do that by listing the multiples of our denominators. 8 and 16 were our denominators. We list those denominators. We found that they have 16 in common. It's the smallest one that they have in common. So I use that one to then, in step 2, create my equivalent fraction. My equivalent fraction had to be in 16ths. 7/8 times 2 over 2 gives me an equivalent fraction of 14/16. Now that I have my equivalent, I can then solve. So I replace the original fraction with 14/16. And now that I have the same denominator in both of those fractions, I can solve it. 14 sixteenths minus 2 sixteenths gave us 12 sixteenths. Right. So 7 eighths minus 2 sixteenths equals 12 sixteenths. All right. Hope you all learned something new today. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll catch you all later in the crew. Bye-bye.